She is one of the best-loved characters of all time. The short-tempered, wildly imaginative, and immensely lovable red-headed orphan named Anne. Anne spelt with an E. For more than a century, Anne Shirley has been capturing the hearts and minds of people around the world. But like Anne's fateful trip from orphanage to Green Gables, there were a few bumps in the road.
Don't want me? You don't want me because I'm not a boy?
Obstacles that only limitless imagination, tenacity, and hard work could overcome.
I am going to do it. I'm 16 years old and just as stubborn as you are.
And it was these traits, combined with the visually stunning, romantic atmosphere found only on the red soil of beautiful Prince Edward Island, that gave Lucy Maud Montgomery and Kevin Sullivan, 80 years apart, enough scope for the imagination to make Anne of Green Gables an enduring classic. Few places on earth can surpass the serene beauty of land and sea found in rich abundance on Prince Edward Island. And it was in these beautiful, almost mystical surroundings that a young Lucy Maud Montgomery found both sustenance and inspiration. Sustenance to survive her difficult childhood, and inspiration to create an idyllic maritime world that people have been escaping to for nearly 100 years. Lucy Maud Montgomery was born in the tiny village of Clifton, Prince Edward Island, on November 30th, 1874, to parents Hugh John Montgomery and his young wife Clara. But on September 14th, 1876, a mere 21 months after Maud's birth, tragedy struck the Montgomery family when Clara died of tuberculosis. In spite of her young age, Maud claimed that she vividly remembered her mother's death.
I looked down at Mother's dead face. It was a sweet face, albeit worn and wasted by months of suffering. My mother had been beautiful, and death so cruel in all else had spared the delicate outline of feature, the long silken lashes brushing the hollow cheek, and the smooth masses of golden brown hair. That one precious memory is all I have of the girlish mother who sleeps in the old burying ground of Cavendish, lulled forever by the murmur of the sea.
It could be argued that Maud's memory of this tragic event was imaginatively embellished. However, the profound impact the loss of her mother had on Maud's life is irrefutable. Unable to care for a child on his own, Hugh Montgomery sent Maud to live in Cavendish, Prince Edward Island with her maternal grandparents, Alexander and Lucy McNeil. Hugh had various jobs nearby and was a presence in the early years of Maud's life, but that changed in 1881 when he decided to pursue business opportunities in the developing Canadian West. At the age of 7, young Maud found herself living in an isolated farmhouse with her elderly, strict, and devoutly religious grandparents. All she had was her imagination and the boundless beauty of Prince Edward Island, and that was all she needed.
I had, in my vivid imagination, a passport to the geography of fairyland. In a twinkling, I could and did whisk myself into regions of wonderful adventures, unhampered by any restrictions of time or place.
In spite of the tragedy, isolation, and loneliness that Maud endured during those early years, her mind and imagination flourished.
I have written at length about the incidents and environment of my childhood because they have had a marked influence on the development of my literary gift. A different environment would have given it a different bias. Were it not for those Cavendish years, I do not think Anne of Green Gables would ever have been written.
Maud loved to write. It was her passion, her refuge. She started writing journals and poetry when she was 9 and never stopped.
I cannot remember the time when I was not writing or when I did not mean to be an author.
Dark, languid
poems. In dark foreboding.
To write has always been my central purpose, around which every effort and hope and ambition of my life has grouped itself.
But her dream of becoming a published author would not easily be fulfilled. At the ripe old age of 16, after having had several poems published for free in the Charlottetown Patriot, Maud was feeling quite confident about her literary prowess, but her confidence was about to be shaken.
I wrote a story for the New York Sun because I had heard that it paid for articles, and the New York Sun sent it back to me. I flinched as from a slap in the face, but went on writing. You see, I had learned the first, last, and middle lesson. Never give up.
Thankfully, Maud Montgomery learned that lesson well. For the next 14 years, through Teachers College, teaching in a one-room schoolhouse, working for a newspaper, the death of her grandfather, heartbreak and general hardship, Maud kept on writing.
In the evenings, after a day of strenuous schoolwork, I would be too tired to write. So I religiously arose an hour earlier in the mornings for that purpose. The fires would not yet be on, of course, and the house would be very cold, but I would put on a heavy coat, sit on my feet to keep them from freezing, and with fingers so cramped that I could scarcely hold the pen, I would write my stunt for the day.
Maud submitted her work to anyone she thought would read it and hopefully pay her for it. Then in 1904, she happened upon a story idea she had jotted down and all but forgotten.
I was looking over this notebook in search of some idea for a short serial I wanted to write for a certain Sunday school paper. I found a faded entry written many years before. Elderly couple applied to orphan asylum for a boy.
He was going to Bright River. We're getting a little boy from an orphanage in Nova Scotia, and he's coming in on the afternoon train.
A boy? You can't be serious. Well, you don't know anything about raising children. Whatever put such an idea into your head?
By mistake, a girl is sent them.
I suppose you're Mr. Matthew Cuthbert. My name is Anne Shirley. Anne spelt with an E.
I thought this would do.
Maud had always wanted to write a book, but never felt she had the time or the beginning.
I have always hated beginning a story. When I get the first paragraph written, I feel as though it were half done. The rest comes easily.
While mulling over the idea from her old notebook, Maud realized she finally had her beginning.
I began to block out the chapters, devise and select incidents, and brood up my heroine. Anne, she was not so named of malice aforethought, but flashed into my fancy already christened, even to the all-important E. Began to expand in such a fashion that she soon seemed very real to me and took possession of me to an unusual extent. She appealed to me, and I thought it rather a shame to waste her on an ephemeral little serial. Then the thought came, write a book.
And with that, Anne of Green Gables was born. And Maud Montgomery's life would never be the same, although she certainly didn't realize it at the time. The original manuscript, finished in October 1905, wasn't exactly snapped up. A total of 5 publishing firms rejected the manuscript. 4 sent cold form letters, and 1 claimed that our readers report that they find some merit in your story, but not enough to warrant its acceptance.
That finished me. I put Anne away in an old hat box in the clothes room, resolving that someday, when I had time, I would take her and reduce her to the original 7 chapters of her first incarnation. In that case, I was tolerably sure of getting $35 for her at least, and perhaps even $40.
But Maud Montgomery was more tenacious than that, and one winter day, after coming across the hat box while rummaging, she decided to give it one more try. Maud packed up her manuscript and sent it to the L.C. Page Company of Boston. This time it was accepted.
The book may or may not succeed. I wrote it for love, not money. But very often, such books are the most successful, just as everything in the world that is born of true love has life in it, as nothing constructed for mercenary ends can ever have. The dream dreamed years ago at that old brown desk in school has come true at last, after years of toil and struggle, and the realization is sweet, almost as sweet as the dream.
Finally, on June 20th, 1908, 4 years after she began writing it, Maud's first copy of Anne of Green Gables arrived.
I candidly confess that it was to me a proud and thrilling moment. There, in my hand, lay the material realization of all the dreams and hopes and ambitions and struggles of my whole conscious existence. My first book. Not a great book, but mine, something which I had created.
Maud Montgomery might not have thought Anne was a great book, but she would soon discover that the rest of the world didn't agree, a fact that took her completely by surprise.
I never dreamed that it would appeal to young and old. I thought girls in their teens might like to read it. That was the only audience I hoped to reach. But men and women who are grandparents have written to tell me that they love Anne, and boys at college have done the same. It is in such letters that a writer finds meet reward for all sacrifice and labor.
Oh, Green Gables, yonder.
I've pinched myself so many times today to make sure that this was real. But it is real, and we're nearly home.
Get up.
Anne of Green Gables was a huge success, selling 19,000 copies in the first 5 months. Soon, the entire world fell in love with the red-headed orphan from Prince Edward Island. It is believed that more than 50 million copies of Anne have been sold worldwide. The hunger for Anne and all things Avonlea was so great that Maud would go on to write 7 Anne sequels. In her lifetime, she wrote 20 novels and 2 collections of short stories, all but one taking place on her beloved Prince Edward Island. However, in 1911, Maud left the island to live with her new husband, Ewan MacDonald, a Presbyterian minister, in the small rural community of Leaskdale, Ontario. Although she visited PEI frequently, Maud would live in Ontario for the rest of her life. It wasn't until her death in 1942 that Lucy Maud Montgomery made her final journey to Prince Edward Island.
A certain amount of my soul, long starved, mounted up on wings as of eagles. I was at home. Heart and soul and mind, I was at home. My years of exile had vanished. I had never been away.
Maud Montgomery may have gone, but her beautiful words and characters would live on, and not just in print. Anne Shirley would also steal people's hearts on stage, the silver screen, and eventually on a device not even Maud Montgomery could have imagined, the television. But perhaps Lucy Maud Montgomery's greatest legacy is her wonderful depiction of a simpler time and the natural, inspirational splendor of her beloved Prince Edward Island, an idyllic place that will forever be an antidote to our hectic modern lives and provide ample scope for the imagination, just like it did for a red-headed orphan named Anne. Anne, spelt with an E.